Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Jamf podcast, a podcast to introduce you to the people and expertise of Jamf. We're here to keep you up to date with what is new and exciting with managing and securing Apple devices. And today we're going to focus on mobile security. But before we do, I want to introduce myself. I'm your co host, Kat Garbist, joined by our newest co host, Sean Rabbit. Sean, can you say hi and let everyone know who you are?
Kat Garbus, thank you for having me. First of all, I want everybody to know that Kat is literally the reason why I'm here at Jamf too, because I was working at Apple and she's like, "Hey, we got this new position open, and you should probably come do this." And so here I am, 4 years later, senior consulting engineer for identity and access management, which means that I know how to get into your computer or let you get into your computer. That's a better way to put it there, since this is a security podcast. Um, I'm also not serious about myself at all. So this would be an interesting, having listened to the Jamf After Dark podcast in the past, I apologize to anyone in HR who's made this decision to let me on this podcast. So we'll see how this goes.
We're probably going to get fired together. Anyways, I first and foremost wanted to thank Katie English. She was the co-host last year, and she's still at Jamf. Sean is just the newest co-host. So thank you, Sean, for being here. And Katie, thank you so much for bringing me onto the podcast, trusting Sean and I with the podcast child. We will raise it hopefully well. But focusing on mobile security today, we are joined by three of our premier security experts here at Jamf.
Yeah, let's say Michael, Gary, and Suzanne. Why don't you introduce yourselves? Tell us what you do here, and we'll go from there.
Thanks for having us today. I am Michael Covington. I am responsible for Jamf's portfolio strategy. So I sit across our management and security products and really help make sure that they're delivered to the market in a really integrated, complementary way. So it's one I'm pretty passionate about and looking forward to the discussion.
And yes, hello everyone. First of all, I'm very happy to be called a premier mobile security expert. That's wonderful. But my name is Gary Scott, and despite this charming British accent, I'm based here in the US, where I help our customers understand our security solutions. I was trying to figure out how long I've worked in security for just now, and apparently it's 16 years, which makes me feel quite old. But yes, I've had a lot of experience in this space.
Hey, I'm Suzanne Sakaria, and you can't tell from my accent, but I've done the opposite thing to Gary, where I was actually born in the US. You betcha. I think that's how they say it in North Dakota. But I live in London and I do the same job as Gary, but in EMEA, which, as I had to explain to my sister the other day, stands for Europe, Middle East, India, and Africa. Michael and Gary and I have worked at a number of security companies together, and it's never a dull moment, is it, guys?
No, not at all. It's an ever-changing, exciting world.
Well, we're really excited to have you all here today. So thanks for carving time out to talk about mobile security. Before we dive into sort of the trends in the market, I think it's fair to call out COVID was a huge disruptor in how organizations approached security, right? We're outside of those four walls of the organization. So therefore, work's being done away from a desk. And I know there's always been focus on desktop security and all of that. So I guess one of the things I would just kind of like to start with, what are some of the security trends you're seeing in the market?
I think really it probably makes sense to just start with the use cases that we're seeing evolve in a lot of organizations with end user computing. And you touched on the key point there, Kat, which is so much work is being done away from a desk, out of the office. Mobility isn't just a form factor; it's a use case, and people are allowed to work from wherever they can be most productive in many environments. And they're now accessing a lot of applications that don't sit in a company data center anymore. And so from a security perspective, we've seen a lot of IT teams now struggling to make sure that people can be connected to the tools that help them maintain productivity, but do so in a way that really maintains the end user experience of these modern platforms that they're embracing to bring mobility to life. And I think that's really the intersection of end user experience, of security, of privacy, of compliance. This is where we're seeing many discussions focused within IT and security teams. And I think it's an exciting time in terms of the opportunity that's ahead, but it's a confusing time for many because the way you deliver technology to these mobile use cases is different. The threat landscape is different. The platforms themselves need to be treated a little bit differently because of the end user experience. And I think that this is really the struggle that we see a lot of our customers trying to get through today.
And the boundaries between business and personal have become super blurry. I mean, they always were on mobile, but I was at a conference recently and many of the presenters were talking about the fact that people don't want to carry around two mobile devices anymore. They just want the one. And so that makes it even more complicated from a security perspective.
I live in Chicago, so if someone, mugs me, I would like to not be robbed twice in one mugging. So I appreciate that thought and can relate to that as well. So when we think of mobile security trends, have you had a chance to talk to any security leaders and what have they been focused on in the year ahead?
I think the biggest difference I've noticed, I think COVID obviously, changed the world in lots of different ways, and it accelerated uses of technology. Like we all embrace Zoom and other products such as that. But I think in mobile security world, I think for the longest time, IT security leaders knew that mobile security was important, but in some ways it felt a bit like an ugly stepchild. They sort of didn't really want to deal with it. It was the teams and the people that were covering security were much more focused on what was happening in offices, on desktops and laptops. I think mobile security, COVID in particular, suddenly accelerated the importance of mobile security. So there's definitely been a change in focus, and it suddenly feels like when we talk to security leaders or security professionals, that rhetoric has changed, where it's very much become a focal area for them, and there's no longer this very clear distinction in their heads between what happens within an office and what happens at home. I think those boundaries well and truly have been blurred, and that's obviously very interesting for us in a world, particularly at Jamf, where we focus so much of our solutions around mobile security.
It's a different set of people as well who are being provided with mobile devices. And when we talk about mobile, we're not just talking about phones, we're talking about tablets as well. People being given iPads. We work with a lot of healthcare organizations where they have care workers going out to visit patients at their home. They don't want to carry around a laptop, they just carry around a tablet with them. And so it's a huge, it's really expanded the capabilities that we have on mobile, and those devices need to be secured in the same way.
Suzanne touched on a really important point there, specifically around the use of mobile technologies in various industries. We're seeing a lot of innovation take place. And with that innovation comes more sensitive applications and access to more sensitive data. It's not just email and calendar anymore that's taking place on mobile. People are accessing employee databases, very rich customer logs. Mobile's even being used to as part of a development experience for organizations that have developers putting software out there. And so there's a lot that mobile now has access to, and I think that that's been game changer to kind of get organizations over this perception gap that mobile's fine. I don't need to apply the same set of security requirements to it that I do my desktops and laptops. It's now in the fold where it's almost being treated just like every other endpoint that the organization has, where they're now saying, I have a strict list of things that I must do to meet compliance, to meet my IT standards, and those things have to be applied to mobile, just like a laptop.
You kind of read my mind there. I was going to say for those listening in on the call who are like, why should we put this hyper focus on mobile versus desktop? You touched on it a bit, but I guess from the group, any additional thoughts around that? Like, why is maybe mobile different, or should we even look through mobile as through a different lens? But why are we talking about mobile? What are some of those differences maybe you've seen or seeing?
The biggest difference you notice immediately when you work in the world of mobile is even if the mobile device was provided by the company, paid for by the company, everything's owned by the company, as soon as it's given to the employee, employees feel very, very protective over that device. They almost immediately use it as their own personal device. Obviously, they put pictures of their children on there, they put banking apps, they basically run their lives from that mobile device, which is a very different experience to what they are used to on their laptop. So any anybody working in mobile security or anybody deploying mobile security solutions to those devices, that is a massive change to what they're used to on traditional laptops. Almost most of our time, particularly when it comes to deployment, is trying to make that very, very easy for employees. And you have to very, very much focus on that privacy element. That's absolutely crucial.
So I want to jump to the grand fallacy in the room here, which is, when I started working for Apple, it was literally 2 months after they introduced the iPhone. And for well over 10 years now, they've been saying how it's the most secure platform and it's the best security. You don't have to worry about things coming through the App Store. What should businesses be looking for vulnerabilities in the mobile space now?
We see social engineering be really prevalent on mobile and it's very easy to trick a user into clicking on something, either by a text message pretending to be from a delivery service or on a Reddit thread or LinkedIn Messenger. The screen size is much smaller on a mobile phone, if we take that as an example. So you don't always see the full address of the site that you're going to. And so hackers are really using the features of mobile devices to their advantage to trick users into clicking on things that look legitimate but are actually malicious.
And that's exactly what I was thinking about too, because it's like it's not the actual platform itself that's vulnerable, right? It sounds
Yeah.
like it's the actual everything else that would be connected up to it, the network, the apps being installed on it, the users.
Yes, 100%. I think uh, the traditional malware that we used to see on Windows devices, that's a very different experience on mobile. But the common theme on both laptops and mobile devices are users. Users are the tricky area. And on mobile, as Suzanne was saying, they're definitely more vulnerable because we're often looking at these devices on the move and the screens are smaller and we're busy doing things. That's where the some of the tricky areas come in terms of falling prey to those kind of phishing attacks, which sitting in front of a laptop looking at a badly worded email you would pick up on, but on a mobile device you find hackers get much more success leveraging the fact that by their very definition people are on the move and perhaps not paying so much attention to it. So users without a doubt are the main area that we try to focus on in terms of protecting.
But many organizations provide training around phishing and they teach their users to look out for certain kinds of things. Michael, what do you think are the more prevalent things that people might not know about?
I almost think of the mobile security problem as a composite one. Just like a laptop or a desktop, you need to think about the layers of protection that you need to defend that device from being compromised. And for me, it's really helpful to think about the device coming out of shrink wrap, because to Sean's point, the iOS operating system is very robust. It is secure the day it's released. But every operating system is written by humans. And every operating system on every platform that we've seen to date has ultimately had vulnerabilities that are discovered and exploited by attackers. And so if you think about the life cycle of a device, it might be great on day one. But what about on day 30 or 1 year in? if the user doesn't maintain that operating system and apply security patches and keep the device configured the way the business does, those are where vulnerabilities start to get exposed. So right at the core, I think that there is that perception gap that the device is secure. It's not. It's not over time in a production environment. And from there, once you start to configure the device for the end user to be productive, what's the next thing that happens to it? You install applications. We've seen so many third-party applications, even those that route through the App Store, that are going through the official channels to get installed. They too have vulnerabilities. And all of these different applications that are being used have access to various data stores and sensors that are on the device, like the camera, the microphone, the photo stream. Any one of these applications could expose data and allow the user to be compromised. And from there, you've already started to talk about the other aspects of threat that can come into the device. The networks that it attaches to, it's a great place for an attacker to sit and intercept data, tamper with data that's going across the network. And then, of course, all of the things that the users do as they interface with the internet. They can click on a phishing link. They can download malware from a third-party app store. So many different threat vectors that really come together in that one small mobile package.
There was one other area, Michael, that I wanted to, perhaps you would have an opinion on, which is, I've seen myself, is it's interesting how over the years mobile security has evolved. Like if you started at the beginning where most people were using Blackberries, which was quite an inherently secure platform, and then much to the pain of the security departments, the CEO probably received a shiny new iPhone around, or an iPad in 2009, and decided he or she wanted their email on it instead of their BlackBerry. And then suddenly the world changed because suddenly everybody wanted to use, an iPhone for their mobile device. And then for the longest time, we were sort of struggling with how to secure them. There was a big kind of trend towards container-based solutions where you would have a certain partition where you'd have your apps locked into it. And it was a little bit clunky. Then we sort of moved away from that. Then there was this kind of move towards, shall we do BYOD or should we do corporate? And now, Michael, I've noticed this we've almost gone full circle and we've moved back to a sort of container-based approach, which is now almost less focused on some of the malware focus or the phishing focus, and a little bit more on separating business and personal, and then also the identities of the people using those devices. Is that a fair summary or something that that you've also seen?
Yeah, it's pretty wild to see how we've come full circle on the concept of a container. But I think the important thing is how the implementation has changed over the years. A lot of organizations, when they started to explore mobile, and specifically mobile in the context of BYOD, they looked at mobile application management or MAM oriented containers, where essentially you looked at just the app and you put your policy in the app, and you basically had to build each and every app that was going to be used by your business as a container, as something that could be protected separately as it's deployed down to the device. I think we learned that didn't scale well. And it also led to scenarios where users' devices just weren't configured well to begin with. They didn't have access to the local Wi-Fi. They weren't having the password set. Then you still had all this policy kind of baked into the app that the user had to go and find themselves. We've now arrived at a better place with what Android is doing with work profiles, with what iOS 16 has now introduced with the work partition. We now have an operating system supported portion of the device that's dedicated to work. And in the Apple model, you can get in and bring that partition into the fold by management and allow you to configure the device as a whole. So really give the user some connectivity, put some policies on that container in terms of what information can flow in and out of it. And then you can make your work applications available just within that container and have policies that follow the container, not the app. So it's much more robust in terms of the capabilities that you have available, and also the security that is going to follow that work partition. So I think it's been a great journey, and I'm really excited about where the technology is, because I think it's something that can now be embraced at scale for a lot of organizations that want to use it either for BYO or for just a more resilient kind of mobile solution that does respect end user privacy, while also making sure that the organization can trust these devices that are being brought in to access business applications.
I did want to ask, because you've touched on a few things, and for those kind of listening in who maybe haven't explored mobile yet, you hit on work partition, work profile. That we're trying to strike that balance. It sounds like between bring your own device. Um, if I'm an employee and it's my device, what's something IT can tell me that maybe would be a benefit unbeknownst to me, that hey, I'm using my own device but I'm not really sure about, you know, MDM on my device? And are there ways Jamf can help with organizations looking to strike that balance?
I think in the early days of BYOD, a lot of businesses believed that the only way that they could allow personal devices into the workplace was to fully manage them. And I think in those scenarios, we saw a little too much management. It was overbearing, taking full control of the device, essentially treating it like it was company owned, and making it so that the business had the ability to wipe the device if it should ever get lost, including all the user's personal data. And also get some visibility into things that the user was doing on their device. And so it was not the right application of the technology, but it was all that was available at the time. I think to your point, Kat, the technology has come around now, and we now have the ability uh, to offer right-sized management. Is kind of the way I think about it, where we no longer have to take full control of the device. It is now possible for management solutions like Jamf Pro to really just offer more of an enablement of a work area on the device. So the user's not giving up any privacy. They're not giving up any visibility into the apps that are installed on their device. They're not giving the business control of the ability to wipe the device or any of the applications that are on it. Instead, they're just saying, this portion of the device I'm going to allow for work, and I'm going to allow my company to configure it for me so that I can be my most productive self the moment I go and start using applications that are put in that corner. So I think that we've actually reached a point now where it's really more about informing end users, educating end users on how their privacy is actually being protected by the platform, and how there are now tools that allow them to self-enroll into some of the services that are being made available through the platform. And it's not something where they have to kind of be forced into full management like they did before. So we've really come a long way with some of the BYOD solutions.
And that's been a big change in the way that businesses have looked at security as well. I mean, I've worked in security for 15 years, and there was a time when IT managers would say, I want to see everything. I want to have full visibility about what's going on the device. Whereas now, when we're speaking to customers, that the IT teams are saying, I don't want to see any of your personal data. I'm only worried about the business data. So now we can offer that perfect solution for the user, your privacy is maintained. Perfect solution for the business, we're only looking at your business data and making sure that that's securely accessed.
So, final thought. Basically, if I were to kind of put a bow on bring your own device, I'll use myself. No one can see what my dating apps are. No, no one can delete photos of my precious puppies. And if I accidentally click on a link that's threatening to my own personal device, there are preventative measures where if I'm like, hey, that's cool, I won $10,000, and I click it, Jamf is actually protecting my personal device. I want to make sure I have that all right for our listeners.
Just so you know, nodding doesn't work on a podcast. Just throwing that out.
Yes, so it's creating that transition, creating that separation between that your business applications will go through our service, and we provide secure access to that, and make sure that data is protected against any malware or vulnerabilities. But all of those dating apps, we won't see any of that. If you want to send those puppy pictures to me, though, I would love to see. So that's up to you.
Okay, okay. Just wanted to check in on that. But I mean, that's all really good. And to what Michael had said earlier, the technology has changed, and I think that's something that message hasn't been out enough. Sean, I'm going to turn it over to you. I think you've got some questions for our guests, so I'm gonna turn over to you for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to jump to this other grand fallacy, being an engineer, and knowing that the target demographic of this podcast is probably a bunch of people who have been managing apples for the last who knows how long there. You've got to be a pretty good nerd like me to want to listen to a podcast about one of the tools that you're using. So, what are the tools? How are people organizations incorporating this new mobile security practice? And did I hear something about we touch androids now at Jamf? Has the world ended?
Well, a device is a device is a device, isn't it, Michael?
It is, and I think hopefully the audience is picking up that we really are thinking about management and security as two sides of the same coin. Very, very complementary set of technologies that are available to not only deploy devices, get them into users' hands quickly and at scale, but to maintain them over time. And maintaining over time really does mean making sure that the right applications are available and that those applications are not vulnerable or insecure, that user actions are made risk-free for the business, and that you really do think comprehensively about making sure that if things do go wrong, that you have an ability to kind of automate actions and remediate and really pull that device back into the folds that the user can stay productive. And so, really, with that said, we're looking at making sure that the same tools that you use to manage your MacBooks, you can use to manage your iOS devices, whether they are company owned or BYOD. And same with the security capabilities. On the security side, when we think about endpoint protection, we think about a robust set of capabilities that start with getting the device to establish secure baselines, whether that means you're kind of lining up with CIS benchmarks or NIST standards, protecting against sophisticated attacks, making sure that you can prevent those user initiated risks. All of that we offer the same kind of pillars of functionality across Mac OS and iOS. And so to your question, Sean, we're really thinking about them hand in hand. We know that businesses are using Macs and iPads and iPhones, and yes, occasionally an Android. And we want to make sure that when it comes to the security policies that we're able to enforce, that you get consistent policy, so that the user on one device is going to get the same experience as a user on another platform type or a device form factor. So I think it's really important to start to think about these things together, because ultimately it's all about consistency of policy and resilience of the information that the business is putting out there for people to stay productive.
So it sounds like in the past, for most people who might be listening to, that it's been specializing on just the Apple market. And now it sounds like this mobile security market is going to be a completely different bag of cats, essentially. I mean, do you think that mobile security will continue to be a specialized area of the security market, or is this just going to be everybody in IT is going to be responsible for it?
I think it will depend. I think organizations are still wrestling a little bit where mobility sits. I think some organizations have very clearly made it part of security and very, very clearly see it as one platform, whether it's a mobile device, a laptop, or a desktop. I think some organizations still keep it separately. But for sure, particularly in the Jamf world where we work, with a lot of customers that use Apple, we're increasingly seeing those teams look at iOS and Mac very, very similarly. So for sure, there's going to be a lot of changes in that area, but without a doubt, we're definitely seeing them looking at kind of one solution for everything.
And I was just going to add to that though organizations are starting to treat all devices the same in terms of the policies that they want to implement, I think it's really important that we also keep in mind that these platforms are unique. These are modern platforms, and we want to make sure that we're using purpose-built solutions on those platforms in terms of how we are implementing these solutions down on the device itself. It's one thing to offer a centralized view of the devices, a centralized pane for configuration of policy. But the way I deliver that policy to an Android device, for example, is going to be different than how I deliver it to a Mac OS device. And for those businesses that are really embracing the Apple platform, we want to make sure that we're leveraging all of the great capabilities that are exposed from the hardware, like Secure Enclave, up to the operating system with things like the Endpoint Security API, and using that to ensure that what we are delivering from a policy perspective is resulting in a fantastic end user experience, and that you're really able to ensure that the end users love the devices that they've embraced for work, while the organization is still able to trust that they meet all of their security requirements, and doing it in kind of a best of breed way, if you will.
So, Michael, what I'm understanding is that we're not going to be introducing a brand new Android MDM solution from Jamf today, right?
I think that's fair to say.
Good, good.
Just to add to Michael's comments regarding getting users excited about using those mobile devices and that experience, which is so important on a mobile device. I think some of the things that we've been doing at Jamf are particularly exciting. I was delighted to find out, as a man that continuously uses his key card to get into the various Jamf offices based around the US, being able to use my mobile device to get access to those offices is just another reason for me to embrace my mobile phone more. And so the side benefit of some of the security offerings that we do, if they particularly have a focus on making our lives easier as employees, there is, of course, the extra benefit of security, and we get the benefits of, for me anyway, of entering all these Jamf offices far more easily.
And that brings up a good point about what we use our mobile devices for as well. I mean, we use our mobiles for authentication. That's one of the ways that we get into our devices to get access to our corporate resources. So if these devices aren't secured, then that's a huge risk, and that's giving a hacker or some kind of bad actor the keys to the kingdom to our business data, and that's not what any organization would want.
I want to talk a little more concretely. What are organizations most concerned about with their modern platforms, whether they're running Mac OS, iPad OS, or iOS?
What are we seeing out in the marketplace right now for where organizations are requesting for security on their platforms, no matter what it is? Mac OS, iOS, iPad OS. Are we seeing more like we're being asked to hit these compliance guidelines, or is it our security team wants us to implement this? What are you seeing from customers?
Well, it's sort of how long is a piece of string? Everybody has different requirements, but something that it can be anything from people having to hit certain criteria or tick boxes when it comes to making sure that their devices are secured, meeting industry benchmarks. Uh, but it could also be a lot of organizations have made a lot of investments in security over the last few years or longer than that. And what they're finding now is that these solutions can be very difficult to manage. They've got antivirus, they've got ZTNA, they've got CASB, they've got all of these different security investments. How do they ensure that they're using all of these solutions to their advantage without too much overlap and without having 10 different portals that they need to manage? So I'm definitely speaking to a lot of customers who are looking to Jamf as a way to consolidate these solutions and find a way to ensure that their security is simple to manage but effective to use.
That's a great point, Suze. I think that really what it boils down to for a lot of organizations is they look across all these different operating systems and platforms that are now in play within their businesses. They want visibility. I think that's really what most of them are asking for right now, is that they want to know, do the devices meet their baseline requirements for use within work? Do they know who the user is that's signed into the device? And do they just have assurances that throughout the course of the day that that device continues to stay secure and compliant? And they want that signal out of the device. They don't want to just think about security and compliance in isolation. They want to feed that data, that assessment, into all of the access decisions that are being made throughout the day. So really, as Suzanne said, ensuring that only authorized users on enrolled devices that we've got a trust relationship with that meet those requirements are accessing our most sensitive data stores. And I think it all starts with visibility.
What would you say is the number one threat out there right now when it comes to device and mobile security?
I'm going to bring it full circle and respond with where I think this conversation started, and it's the social engineering and the phishing aspect. Because I hate to say it, users are the weakest link, and it's often easier to compromise an end user, to give away a sensitive access credential than it is to break into what are rather robust platforms, and so that is usually the first port of entry for most of the attackers. So phishing, and I think it, as we've said earlier, it's no longer isolated to company email. It's in every application that the end user interfaces with, and so it's really important that as we start to think about not just the training but the tooling that goes into preventing it and curbing it, needs to be very comprehensive across the device, and anything that's going to potentially reveal that business credential. So looking forward to passwordless technologies that are going to ultimately help protect these credentials more. But phishing today, still the number one threat.
Michael, you bring up a good point there where hackers are looking for corporate credentials rather than what they're traditionally looking for, which is your financial details or something like that. And in the past, we've spoken to IT teams where they've said, oh, I don't really care if they hand over their bank details. That's their problem. That's their fault. Whereas if it's corporate information, then businesses really need to listen up and do something to help to protect their users and educate those users as well.
I would say one comment on this is I think naturally there's a tendency to focus a lot on some of the very malicious targeted attacks, things like Pegasus, and often you read those in the media. But often, as Michael said, the reality is still it's users being tricked. I think if you look at some of the recent attacks that have been very well publicized, for example, like in the Uber attack, for example, that was literally an employee being tricked to give away certain information by the hacker contacting that employee on WhatsApp, acting as if they were from Uber's security department, and then literally tricking the user to give away their credentials. So whilst we continuously read about some very nasty corporate espionage type malware in the press, as Michael kind of touched upon, it's still there's everyday users being tricked with some traditional basic phishing attacks that cause the most issues for our customers.
Gary, Suzanne, battle of the accents here for you. So what I'd really like to know is there any difference that you're seeing primarily in the US based companies versus the EMEA based companies for security concerns?
Yes, I could actually answer that because I obviously started my career in the UK, and then I obviously moved to the US. I would say the biggest difference is privacy. I would say in Europe and in the UK, there is definitely much more focus on privacy controls. There are workers' councils. There's an awful lot of focus on individual privacy rules and laws. The US are a little bit more lenient in that area. Of course, from a BYOD perspective, everybody cares about their privacy. But from a corporate device perspective, American companies in general are far more inclined to want to understand exactly what's happening on those devices. Whereas in Europe, we certainly see a more focus on privacy. Would you agree with that, Suzanne?
Yeah, I think we get asked a lot about where data is held and specifically data not being held in the US, if at all possible. So I would agree with Gary on that one.
Perfect. I feel like we could go on and on about security. So maybe we'll have to have each of you back at some point to continue the conversation. I want to thank each of you for being here today. Gary, Susan, Michael, thank you so much for joining us and sharing what you're seeing in the field. Sean, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being an amazing co host. And I hope everyone learned something new today. And don't be that person that unlocks all the doors and causes a security incident. So thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. And yeah, remember that Nigerian prince that just befriended you may not actually have your banking details, so please don't send them to him. And we'll catch you next time.